Thank you for joining us tonight to learn more about CG Virtual for next year and beyond. A couple of housekeeping things as we get going. My name is Nora Hoover, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. And also with me tonight is Katie Brennan. She's our Coordinator of Connected Learning and has been instrumental in all the work we've done with virtual K through 12 this year. And then Stacy Conrad, who's going to keep it all going and keep us on track tonight and help us with the question and answer portion in particular. Another important thing is we'll have some people joining and we're recording this in case people couldn't be here tonight or want to go back and to a part they couldn't remember. And the final is we will be taking some questions that we'll go back through at the end and walk through the ones that we're getting, and some of them will probably end up in our frequently asked questions online too. Instead of using the chat box, however, please use the Q&A feature in the webinar, and that is where we will be looking for questions from all of you that are here with us tonight that may want to ask something. So I'll go ahead and get started. We want to share details about what CG Virtual would be in the future because there will be some changes as we implement this in a more traditional sense. The expectations for families and the application process will be some of the topics tonight. We understand that health and safety concerns have been the primary reason that most of our families have chosen to be in CG Virtual this year. We know that many of you have questions about health and safety requirements for next year in our schools. And I wish I did, but I do not have answers, nor do any of us right now from the governor or from the Indiana Department of Health on many of the things that will have to be, that you might be concerned about. But I did want to specifically talk about probably some of those concerns over masks. And at this point, Center Grove will follow any mandates that are provided by the Indiana Department of Health. If the Department of Health does not mandate masks for schools, Center Grove will not require masks for our students or staff. Mask wearing, of course, will be allowed even if it's not mandated, but it would not be required for all students to attend traditional in-person school. This is all the information we have available regarding masks. I cannot provide additional information tonight, but I do think knowing how things are going and hopefully all the trajectories continue, but that's where we're going. We'll do what the state mandates us to do for next year. I'll talk first about the application process. This year, because of health and safety, anyone that felt compelled to stay home and be with family and stay safe in that way, we allowed into virtual school. But we have also said all along that we feel like the best place is person to person with our teachers, where we can provide every service that we have in our district. And some of those don't always translate into the virtual world. And so for this next year, there will be some admissions considerations when people apply to be in virtual for next year. We will look at past academic success. And what that means is we'll look at the classroom engagement this year and the learning progress of your student throughout the year. If a student was virtual this year, we'll look very specifically at their engagement in the virtual classroom. Virtual students who are disengaged during this school year are not candidates for continuing in virtual school past this year. We will also look at teacher input, because I know our teachers have built great relationships with our students, whether they've been virtual or in person this year, and would know the most about their academics. We will look at attendance, again, both traditional or virtual this year. And we will also have to pay attention to the interest in our grade levels and our courses. This year, because of COVID, we had an overwhelming number of families that wanted virtual, and we were able to offer that in our elementary, middle school, and high school environment because we had so many families. We didn't know what we would get last year and how many families would want to take advantage of that. And we had that same thing last year. We have to have enough people, or it's something that is really hard for us to do with our current staff. So if there are too few students that apply for particular grade levels or at the secondary level courses, those may not be offered for next year. So we really just need to get our numbers. We need to know how many families want their children to continue in virtual, and then we will make those decisions and communicate out with families as soon as possible. Our application window does close on June 2nd. Administrators at that point will determine which students are eligible and then how many students would be in each grade level. And we need that information then to determine student enrollment and whether we have enough to offer virtual, and in which grades, K through 12. The teaching and learning staff, Katie and I and the rest of our department will work really closely with our principals. And we just need a lot of time to make those decisions, which is why the window is where it is. Early in June. I know last year we really didn't have information for any of this until early July, even into mid-July. The situation was constantly changing and the requirements upon schools. And this year, we feel like we're able to make that change. There will be some changes in the elementary model as we look at a long-term sustainable model and what we feel like is best for student learning and student engagement. And so some of the things that will be different if your child was in virtual this year and it's something you're considering for next year. The first is not all students who apply will be selected for enrollment. We will look at those considerations and criteria to make those determinations. We will have mandatory synchronous instruction daily. In our elementary model, we had specific teachers tied to specific classrooms. And that's what they did this year, is they taught virtual. And we really took a leap last year in doing that model. But what we found is a lot of the schools that did something else this year are now doing what we did in the future. They see that as the best model, where it's teachers in the elementary and only a virtual world. We do need enough students, though, to do that, which is why we are going through this process to figure out our families that are interested. We also know that synchronous daily interactions between students and teachers was really important. And we saw a lot of correlation between student success and joining those live sessions. So that in the future will be part of being in the elementary virtual program. Also, students must commit to virtual for a full school year. We feel like if this is a choice families want to make, that we're not really offering this necessarily because of COVID. We're offering it because we just think there are some families that this worked for, and we want to see that interest level. And so it will be a full year commitment. Students and parents must agree to the expectations that are outlined in the application process. And I know in the emails that you received last week that you could go to those. There was a hot link in there for those that you can look at them specifically. And one of the very first things that we didn't do last year because of the in-person issues and not being able to have visitors in our building that we will do this year is that we want all of our parents and students to complete some mandatory training, either in person or through an online module. So everyone has more abilities and capabilities in Canvas, because that was a really big hurdle at the beginning of the year to get our students and our parents ready to be in the online world. And then the last big change is that elementary students will have access only to grade level curriculum in the virtual world. This is a choice program now as we continue virtual. And so we will not be including all of our offerings, both in elementary and in our secondary schools. And so it would not include our high ability offerings. Those choice programs you need to be in person for those.
Okay, hi there, everyone. My name is Katie Brennan, and I'm the coordinator of Connected Learning here at Center Grove Schools. And we are going to talk a little bit about the parent-student compact that we have worked on. And this is basically an agreement for the parents and the students that wish to join virtual. This was created with a great deal of feedback from administrators and teachers that were teaching virtual this year. And, kind of just figuring out what worked best for our Center Grove students and how our students could be very successful in the virtual world. So these are the things that we are asking our parents to agree with. We have this list in great detail on our website. I'm going to just do some highlights here, so I'm not going to go into great detail on each and every one of these, but you can find all of this at our website, and we will give that web address to you multiple times during this presentation. So one of the things I wanted to highlight was that at the beginning of each semester, you will need to go physically to your child's home school and pick up any materials, consumables, textbooks that the student will need. And we are asking for that to be done once each semester for sure, but there could be other times during the semester that the teacher has things that may need to be picked up physically by the parent as well. Additionally, I think that Mrs. Hoover already hit on this, but we have a mandatory parent training course. It is not available at this time, but it will be available right at the beginning of the school year. So we will ask for parents and students to complete a training course prior to the start of the fall session. Additionally, another highlight that I want to touch on here is that we are asking our virtual families to rent a Center Grove device. Actually, for elementary, you won't have to rent. We are just asking you to use a Center Grove device. You have a tech fee in your textbook rental. And our elementary students have a device with that. And we are asking for our elementary students to use those devices, if at all possible. And the reason behind that is that because we can support the devices that are Center Grove devices much easier. And we feel like we can push out updates. We can make sure your students have all of the apps that they need. And if there's any issues with the device, we are able to get you in touch with our IT department, and they're able to troubleshoot that pretty easily with you if it's a CG device versus if it's a personal device. So just know if you choose to use a personal device, that we will not be able to support those nearly like we can our Center Grove devices. So that is another piece of the parent compact we are asking you to strongly consider. The next thing that I want to hit on is a very important one, and it was something we asked of our virtual families this year as well, that students come in person here physically at their school campus for any state and local assessments. And so that would be things such as NWEA, I Read for our third graders, I Learn. There could be some other assessments thrown in there as well that we would request the students to physically to come to campus for. And that is a mandatory commitment we're asking of our families that enroll in virtual next year, that you are committing up front that you will participate in the assessments that we ask you to, and that you will physically come to our campuses to do so. Provide your student with reliable internet access at home. Ensure that your student has scheduled dedicated time to complete their work. This was one that we learned this year just by talking to many of our virtual families that had a lot of success, that if they scheduled their day and just like they would in a typical classroom, and students got up with an alarm clock and got up and got moving in the morning and had a healthy breakfast, and then started on their daily schedule, that it seemed that that structure helped the students be much more successful. So we are asking parents to make sure that you can give that to your student and dedicate time each day for them to complete their work. Ensuring that our students have the ability to be in front of a computer daily. That does not mean that they will spend their entire day in front of a computer. But it is going to be a requirement that our elementary learners will have synchronous or live sessions each day with their teachers. So it may be first thing in the morning, it may be different times throughout the day for a reading group or a math group, and that will be at the teacher's discretion. They will communicate that with our families, but those are mandatory for participation and for attendance, that our elementary students are able to attend those sessions just like they would attend in a physical classroom space. We just ask the parents to partner with us and continue to monitor your students' completion of coursework, and to check due dates in the calendar and Canvas and make sure they're staying on track with their work. I went one too far. supporting and encouraging our students and making sure that work is getting completed, staying in contact with the teachers regularly. So communication is a very important piece, and that's communication between the parent, the student, and the teacher. And so that can be done in multiple ways. There's lots of emails that go back and forth. There's a Canvas inbox feature. There's the Center Grove email, but making sure that the parents can communicate regularly with the teachers and also assist the students in that communication. And then encouraging our students to reply to their teacher. This feedback idea in Canvas is something that this year we learned is very important. And so we know communication between teachers and students is extremely important, and teachers giving feedback to students on their work and then students being able to respond to their teachers is a really nice feature that Canvas allows us to do. And it became very critical in the progress of our students. One more thing to highlight is that daily attendance will be critical in our virtual learning environment next year. We will have a grade level requirement daily. That could look different based on the level that your student is in. Sometimes it could be a quiz that the student goes on and answers a question to. It could be a live synchronous lesson where the teacher is taking attendance because they see your student pop up on their screen. There's lots of different ways to take attendance, but there will be a daily attendance requirement that students will have to complete every single day, and they will be held to the same attendance and truancy guidelines that the rest of our students are held to. And we will definitely need our parents' partnership in making sure that gets done. For our elementary students, if there is going to be an absence in the virtual world, we just ask that you follow the same protocol that you do in traditional school and report that absence to Picket Patrol, and we will make sure it gets into Skyward.
I'm going to talk through our student agreement. Many of these similar to parents, so I'll just highlight some differences. Obviously, that our students follow our acceptable use policy. The Canvas is our primary platform for virtual learning, so our students do have to know and understand that. They'll complete requirements for attendance each day, and that would be attending those live sessions and completing work. They should complete all their coursework, activities, assignments by the due dates. As part of keeping up with their coursework, participate in those live Zoom sessions. That's the instructional pieces that we found that had a big correlation with success this year for our students in the elementary program. Communicate with teachers, and our kids have learned so much this year and come so far in that. We want them to continue to advocate for themselves through email and reaching out to their teachers. On that, to continue, they would need to read and respond back to their teachers. Next slide, Katie, sorry. Read and respond to their teachers, complete all, this is the same as a parent one, we need all of our students to complete required state and local assessments on campus. And we had some flexibility in this year, but it helps us monitor how students are doing compared to other students that are in the district and also nationally with norms data. And that is important data that our principals and our teachers use in their teaching. So we're going to require that in virtual for next year. They'll use their school issued device for educational purposes and maintain that positive academic progress that we tell they're learning at grade level and as much as at the same pace as they can do. Those last couple they will complete the mandatory student orientation course. And I did see that was a question. If my student was in virtual this year, will they need to do that next year? And that is something that we will require of all of our virtual students. I know every time you pick up little things, even if it's just small pieces, I think there's so many features in Canvas. We continue to learn more and more, and I know our students and families will too. And then also participate in individualized instruction and assigned interventions by their teachers. There will be some requirements for remaining a virtual learner, and we've known this year with health and safety, we have not required families to come back to a traditional setting because we wanted to honor the different needs of every individual family in our district. But as virtual becomes a choice program, if it's not working, we need to change that and come back to the traditional setting. And so joining live sessions as scheduled by the teacher, which is really attending class every day and being in attendance, are mandatory. And if a student's not doing that, they may need to come back. These are all reasons a student may have to come back to traditional. Another is to attend district testing for state and local assessments, which is something we just do when kids are in the building, but this is a requirement for virtual families. Remaining academically eligible for CG virtual, and this doesn't mean every kid's getting all A's. What it does mean is we do some grade check, have a process in place where every so many, or in a cycle, that we look at grades and determine eligibility. And we know there may be some things going on with families, and teachers and our administrators will look into that. But we are going to do those grade checks to make sure students are progressing in their learning. And if not, traditional is likely a better option, and that there are no issues with academic dishonesty as per our handbook rules, because we need to make sure our students are learning and are able to do that independently, just like they would need to if they were in school. This last slide is really a self-assessment, and it asks you a series of questions that will help you decide if this is a program, a choice virtual program is something that's going to work well for your family. So I would suggest, if you haven't done that already, to go ahead and use that QR code and go through that assessment. And the last window is just about the process itself. And so the application window is open, and it's open until June 2nd. You can see lots of information online at our Center Grove website /virtual21. And we will add a lot of probably frequently asked questions after this webinar. We'll be working on things to get out there for families who probably have a lot of the same questions you do, but couldn't join us tonight. So we want to make sure we keep the website up to date to support all of you. And with that, that is actually our last slide, besides just questions. And so we're going to go out to the questions you've been putting in the Q&A section, and we'll answer those questions.
I will hop on and take the first question. The one I'm just going to speak to, one I feel like that I have a confident answer. And there's a question here about special considerations for students with health needs. What would that potentially look like as far as being able to be in virtual and or traditional, and some flexibility? Yeah, so we would just, the answer to that question is these would be a case-by-case basis. And so that if there is a special health need or consideration, then we would need to look at that application carefully, and you would need to work with your building administrator to go over what the special health needs are, and each one of those would be a case-by-case basis.
I'm going to lump a lot of the other questions together, only because they have a lot to do with the health and safety issues about social distancing in schools and a mask mandate. And honestly, we will follow anything the Indiana Department of Health mandates. If the Department of Health feels there's a risk that warrants precautions, we will comply with any of those mandates and any of those precautions. Again, if those are recommendations and not mandates, or we will offer both options, that students can wear masks. Obviously, those will be allowed for as long as needed. And then for those students who, without a mandate, do not want to wear masks, there would be that option too. And that would be for our staff or our students. There's a question on here about, can a virtual switch switch to in-person classes as well? And we really are a year commitment. I will say that we offered both semesters as different options last year because we felt like we needed to provide, in the pandemic situation, our families with as much flexibility as possible and allow our families and our district to be able to respond to whatever the current situation was. And that caused for a pretty crazy year for all of us. But one of the things we learned about that semester commitment that we don't want to, and this is a choice program, there was a lot of disruption to the traditional environment when students came back at semester. And in some places, we even had to add an extra teacher. And so that meant a grade level with 4 teachers went to 5 teachers, and we had to shuffle around an entire grade level at a building. Actually, we did that in a couple places. And so that impacted our students who had picked traditional and didn't get to have their same teacher both semesters. And we did not want that disruption in a choice program, quite honestly. And so this choice program will be for a full year. Another question about virtual students attending class from out of states for a short time. And I will say that students will need to access live instruction when it's taking place. So depending upon where you're at, that could be really easy or that could be very difficult. And so there's not a specific answer for that other than your student would still need to attend school, and attending school means being online with their teacher when their teacher is teaching live sessions. And that should occur every day and often multiple times a day. And so a student will have to engage in the learning. Now, if a student is going to miss mandatory state testing, that's a little bit different. And so we would not allow families to be gone during that time period. And we've done this even before virtual school, that families, if they were going to be gone for longer periods of time and miss those windows, in the past have had to withdraw from school and then re-enroll when they come back. And we would follow that same process for if it impacted the state testing window. There's a question on here. If the assessment window is open until June 2nd and you've already registered, do you still need to register? If you have followed the instructions that were in that original email that came out last week to all of our families and went ahead and filled out the application for admission, you do not have to do that again.
They might be talking about registering a kindergartner.
Now, if you're talking about registering a kindergartner, then that would be different because you registered your child online. If you want them in virtual school, you have to fill out the virtual school application. So those are different. Someone asked if you'll get a copy of this presentation. There's not really, I'm not sure about a copy. Stacy Conrad does post it on the website, so you'll have access to this probably by morning. That should be on the /virtual21 part of the website. A question about the classroom setup, and will these classes be exclusively virtual, or will there be some students sitting in a classroom and some students being live? And for those of you who are in virtual this year, you know that our classes were all one group of students, one classroom of students, and one teacher. And that is the model we picked. And there are some real benefits to that. The relationships teachers build with their students. I think that the relationship a student and the connection a student gets back from that, we know how valuable that is to learning. And so that was something we really wanted in our virtual world. And splitting a teacher between kids online and kids in person was very difficult. And we did not want to do that. And really, we had to hire some extra teachers this year. And that was really necessary in the situation. We had a lot of families that wanted virtual. And we do not want to have an environment where a teacher is doing both environments. So it will be, if we have enough students for a class, it will be a class of students with a teacher who is only teaching virtual students. question about applying, our timeline is that we will let families know in June whether we're able to have a virtual section for their student and if their student has been accepted into that. I would say mid to probably about the third week of June, third or fourth week at the latest, we will know what courses we were offering, or what, grade levels we're offering, and which students would be participating in that. The last two questions are really related that I see, there's more, but the two that I see together are about having options to go in person and vice versa. And again, we're considering this a choice program this year, and we're asking for that full commitment. And I know for some families that might be more than they're willing to commit to right now, and we understand that. But it will be for the full year, and we're not really having families, we're not having that flexibility to go back and forth. As far as our deadline, we are on the June 2nd deadline, and that's what we're picking, or where we need to do so that we can make all the decisions we need to make after that about, one, whether we're having the virtual program, but then we need to staff that, and we need to make adjustments across all of our buildings within the classroom environments of really every class as students might come out of those. And so it is a domino effect and a very long domino chain of things that need to happen. And so we want to make sure we are ready for students to come back the first day and doing our very best. And that takes quite a bit of time. So we want to provide that time for our administrators this summer. And so we are asking families for the June 2nd decision. That is our deadline.
Can you talk about the timeline?
I did. I'm sorry, I'm just looking through the questions to see if there are any we haven't answered. Someone asked if if there aren't enough students, let's say we only have 8 or 10 students in a classroom that have selected to want to be in CG virtual, and we do not offer that grade level, the other choice, yes, would be to be traditional in-person instruction for next year. And really, I know, and I've said this answer to a lot. I've talked to a lot of parents on the phone this year about the choices of, and if we're almost to the end of it, but our 2021 school year, a lot of families just really having a hard time with the health and safety and the choices they have to make. And, we have all made so many tough choices this year. And we still have some tough choices to make. And I know this is an incredibly tough choice we're asking of our families. And that choice is that June 2nd is the date, and we're asking for commitments by that point, because we can't do the rest of our work if we don't have those things, whether we have enough for a virtual program in the elementary, and then all the things that follow that. And I know you have really, really tough choices to make as parents on what are we going to do for next year. And if we know June 2nd is the deadline and we have to decide, you have those tough choices right now too. I wish I could let everyone decide until August 2nd, but we can't do that and offer the exceptional experience we want your children to have in our district, whether it's in a virtual school or traditional school. If we wait that long to do it, we can't be ready to offer that on day one. And that's what we have to do, because we don't have enough time with kids, honestly. And every moment is important. And so we need to make the first day and the second day and the third day count as much as the 40th day and the 100th day. And so it is a really tough choice. We know we're asking. It was hard for us to put this timeline together, knowing what that would mean for families. But June 2nd is our deadline, and we are asking families to make that choice, and we're not having that flexibility to make those decisions, because once we pull a teacher or hire a teacher or whatever it is we need to do for a virtual section, we need to keep that section at a certain number, or then we would have to cancel it on the families who had wanted that. And we do not want to do that. Once we make a decision whether to have virtual in a grade level or not, we want to be able to commit to that. A point of contact for further questions. I think there's a link even on the, no, I'm going to ask Stacy real quick.
We can add one.
Oh, we're going to add a link, which was the best place. And then I know we did this in the fall where Stacy and I would go through lots and lots of questions and just answer those that came in. So then she could post those in the frequently asked questions. Or if your family has some really specific questions that you feel are unique, just make sure to put your contact information on there, and maybe someone will need to reach out to you personally. And I think as you scroll through, I think I was able to answer all your questions. Oh, someone did ask one last question for a grade level. How many students do we need? We need pretty close to the regular class size of students. So we need probably between 22 and 25 students per section for us to be able to offer virtual school for next year. That does have some varying, so don't hold me. Those are not firm numbers. It's more of a window, but they would need to be similar sizes to our in-person students. Well, I thank all of you for joining us so much. 49 minutes goes really fast, or 39, I guess. I appreciate how amazing our Center Grove parents are. We have great kids that come to our schools or our virtual classrooms every day. And we know that's not an accident, because we have amazing parents out there who are doing so many wonderful things at home and raising their children, that you come to us and drop your children off, and they are wonderful young people. So thank you so much for all you have done, particularly in this year when it's been really rough. I know it's been rough in our professional lives, and it's been, I know the three of us sitting here are parents, and we have commiserated a bit about our own children, middle schoolers, and all the different blended and e-learning models, and elementary students who are just struggling, and of course high school kids who, well, they're just kind of difficult, right? But wonderful. And so it's been a really hard year to be a parent, but thank you for being here in CG and choosing our district, choosing to live here. And again, if you have more questions, reach out on the website, look for some frequently asked questions. There might be some questions that come up in our secondary discussion next that go up on the frequently asked questions too. And so again, thank you very much. And we appreciate all your support. Good night.